Good afternoon, you're watching WION World is One News on the Z Network. I'm Amitabh Revi. Let's get you up to speed with our top story, which is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who will be visiting the Russian city of Sochi tomorrow. There he's all set to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin. Prime Minister's Russia visit comes just weeks after the Prime Minister held an informal summit with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Russia has been one of the biggest suppliers of weapons to India, and the two countries have enjoyed a special relationship over several decades. So what makes the Indian Prime Minister head to Sochi? The Indian ambassador has what's on the table.
It is a very important and a very different kind of meeting between the Prime Minister of India and the President of Russia. You know, we normally have a system of annual bilateral summits which are structured where you negotiate and you come out with documents or agreements or joint statements. This time the difference is that the President of Russia invited Prime Minister to come to visit him and to discuss various issues.
So Prime Minister Modi will be in Sochi in Russia tomorrow for a one-on-one meeting with President Putin. This is not the formal summit that India and Russia hold every year. Last year it was held in St. Petersburg. This year Russian President Vladimir Putin will be traveling to India for the formal summit. This is an informal summit on the same lines as what the Prime Minister had with the Chinese President Xi Jinping recently. Iran, Syria and Afghanistan are likely to be on the Prime Minister and Russian President Putin's talks. Siddhant Sibal joining us now on the phone line for more on that. Siddhant, so close on the heels of the meeting that the Prime Minister had with Xi Jinping, now a similar sort of meeting with the Russian President.
Well, it's a very important meet that's going to happen on Monday, tomorrow, and there will be the meet starts at 3:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and of course this meeting coming after that informal summit which happened in Wuhan. So this is the second informal summit of the Prime Minister of India, and that too in Sochi, that famous resort in Russia. And remember, and interestingly actually, this summit that's going to take place, informal summit that's going to take place between the Indian Prime Minister and the Russian President is coming after the Russian President meeting the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad at the same very resort, Sochi. And of course, on the focus will be on many things, including the issue of terror, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, and importantly, this informal summit coming on the back of the Americans withdrawing from the Iran deal. So that will be a big focus of the entire summit that is going to take place. I can add you that our ambassador to Russia, Pankaj Saran, has spoken to a news agency and spoken how that Iran deal will be a major focus, including Afghanistan and, of course, Syria.
Siddhant, this is an informal summit on the same lines as the Prime Minister had with President Xi Jinping. There is a set of formal summits that the two sides also have.
Yes, very true. This is an informal summit, and there was this. We had a talk with the ME officials who said that more such informal summit can be expected in coming time. So this can be a new norm that's taking place in front of our eyes when it comes to Indian foreign policy. So important thing is that in these informal summits give that. There's no protocol, so it gives you that flexibility of discussing anything without the agenda. And when there's no protocol, there's no joint communique, there's no joint press statements, and of course there are only statements by both the leadership, the PMO office, and of course the Russian President's office that they issue a statement later on, like which it happened with the Chinese.
Siddhant, stay on the line with us because we also joined on the phone line by a senior fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, Nandan Unnikrishnan. Mr. Unnikrishnan, is this the new norm, these kind of informal summits between top leaders, especially when it comes to the Prime Minister?
Well, you know, you've had what now is called informal, but you've had meetings between leaders across the globe, even in the past, which were not formal state visits. But for example, I mean, just a couple of days ago, Angela Merkel was in Sochi to meet Mr. Putin. So this is not something new. It may be something new in the sense in the recent past for us. We haven't practiced this high-profile kind of bilateral diplomacy. But it's a good thing when leaders meet and discuss big issues and try to understand each other's view on the big picture.
Mr. Unnikrishnan, we do believe that this meeting, though, was initiated by the Russian President Putin himself.
You know, the problem is it depends on who tells you that. I'm sure the Russians don't say that they did it, or the Indians don't say they did it. But I would suspect that I mean, it's not about who started it, but I suppose they started talking about it sometime in March.
Well, it's also following close on the heels of the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval's visit to Russia, where he also met Sergei Lavrov. There would be a whole range of issues that would be discussed between the two leaders, Mr. Unnikrishnan.
Yes, of course. I mean, undoubtedly. I mean, an informal summit, I mean, that is just nomenclature, does not mean that there is absolutely no preparation. The only difference is probably that unlike like formal summits, there are no predetermined outcomes, in the sense that you don't have joint statements and agreements and all that to sign. But essentially, you identify the basic issues that you want to discuss. Both your leaders will be prepped very intensely to what the views of the respective countries are, and then there will be a discussion on that.
Nandan Unnikrishnan, Senior Fellow, ORF, joining us on the phone line. Also on the phone line is MD Nalapat, who is a strategic expert. Mr. Nalapat, this meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Putin follows close on the heels of the informal summit that the Prime Minister had with Xi Jinping. These are top leaders of the P5.
Well, the fact is that the Chinese are very optimistic that there will be once again the India-Russia-China triangle. Frankly, that idea was not in very good shape vis-a-vis the Chinese. But lately, they have been much more interested in that idea. And certainly the Russians also will be very interested in that idea. So clearly there would be an effort to ensure that the India-Russia triangle, the India-Russia-China triangle, does not overshadow the India-US duo.
Mr. Nalapat, one of the other concerns that all three countries also do have is terrorism, especially emanating in or around the AFPAC region.
Well, that's perfectly right. But again, the reality is that there are differing or alternative strategic scenarios for different countries. China, for example, is going to find it very difficult to break away from Pakistan. And Pakistan absolutely does not want to let go of the Taliban, does not want to let go of the Haqqani network, because these are the only cards that Pakistan has got as a mischief maker. So they create mischief and then say, what are you going to give us to try and damp down the mischief? So that has been their game. It's been a successful game. And I don't see the Chinese backing away from supporting them for some time. The Russians are therefore forced to have a policy which is not as India-friendly as in the past because of their close relationship with China. On the other hand, you have the United States, which is waiting for Narendra Modi to sign the other two strategic agreements, the military agreements, which so far in all these 4 years he has not signed. He has only signed one. The difficulty with all these multiple options is that you might end up in a situation where you displease everybody rather than please everybody.
Mr. Nalapat, you did mention the Taliban. Russia's links with the Taliban leaders in the past. Do you think the fact that the 7 Indians who were kidnapped in Afghanistan could be on the agenda in terms of getting Russian help, if any, if possible?
The country which has really got influence with Taliban is Pakistan. And from that point of view, the one country that has huge influence with Pakistan is China. I don't see how Russia is going to be a player in that particular on that particular field.
MD Nalapatha, China expert, on the phone line with us. We still do have Nandan Unnikrishnan on the phone line. Mr. Unnikrishnan, the last point that I was trying to raise of the 7 Indians who have been kidnapped in Afghanistan, would that in any manner possibly be on the table in terms of getting any Russian assistance in releasing them?
It was definitely on the table when Mr. Doval, our NSA, visited Moscow earlier this month. So I don't know if the specific reference will be made to these 7, but that Afghanistan will be discussed broadly, I am quite sure about that.
And the other issues globally that interest both countries, including what's happening in Syria and Iran, would that also be discussed between the 2 leaders?
I think Iran will definitely be discussed because the situation post-withdrawal from the nuclear agreement of the United States is, as they say, fraught with all kinds of possibilities. So undoubtedly India would like to know what Russia's position will be on Iran, because Iran, whether we like it or not, is an important partner for us, not just from the point of view of hydrocarbons, but also in terms of connectivity with Afghanistan, Central Asia. And if you look at it long-term strategically, the North-South corridor could be our alternative to the BRI.
And about Syria, Russia's role in Syria, would the Prime Minister be discussing that in any manner?
Well, you know, in the overall sense, I don't think the Prime Minister is going to get into nitty-gritty of what is happening on the ground in Syria. But in overall terms, yes, because India is interested in stability in West Asia. After all, it's one of the greatest providers of our energy, as well as we have variously estimated as 7 or 8 million people there who contribute significantly to our revenue. So therefore, it is of greatest importance for us that stability exists in West Asia. So in that context, undoubtedly, there will be discussions between the
Nandan Unnikrishnan, Senior Fellow ORF, thanks so much for joining us.